In this online presentation for our class, we will be looking at what direct instruction is and then what is the theoretical background for direct instruction. So first of all, let's take a look at the theory behind direct instruction. Direct instruction is based on behaviorism. And I put a picture of B.F. Skinner here, who is considered the modern day father of behaviorism. You might have also heard of Watson. His time was before B.F. Skinner. And behaviorists believe that learning is a behavioral change, very different from other learning theories. And they believe that we change people's behavior by reinforcing what they're doing. And it's through a process that they called operant conditioning. In other words, you are given a stimulus. So stimulus is the singular version. Stimuli would be the plural version. And that stimulus could be a question. It could be a visual. And then you have to provide the correct response. And when you provide that correct response, then you receive a reinforcement. So if you think about this, for example, we teach our children, all right, don't touch the stove, it's hot, right? And so they can see if the coil on the stove is hot or if there's a red light, right? That's the stimulus that's showing them don't touch it, right? And then when they don't, we can provide praise, or they can get a reinforcement when that's not so good if they actually touch it and they get burnt, right? So it's basically the stimulus of them seeing that the stove is hot, and therefore they're learning, their behavior then would be not to touch it. All right, and what Skinner and other behaviorists have said is that many types of animals, they've trained dogs, they've trained rats, obviously including human beings, can learn through this operant conditioning. We can train all of the circus animals you see. If you have a dog and you take the dog to obedience training, they're using this behaviorist model. So I'm going to train you with the behavior that I want to see, and you will get reinforced. And I just want to show you this. Skinner did a lot of his original work with rats. He also did training on his own child. And this whole idea of operant conditioning was he put these rats in this box he created, hence he named the box after himself. And he trained the rats that when they saw a light, if they pressed down on this lever, then they would get a food treat. But notice there was also a shock generator. So if they didn't do it, they received a mild electrical shock, which obviously didn't feel so good. So Skinner was demonstrating, right, that you can train all different kinds of animals through this stimulus, which for them was the light, and then the response, and then reinforcing the response through the food pellet. So for this operant conditioning to work, 3 essential conditions have to be in place. The first one is that the individual must exhibit the behavior, or any behavior actually, and then there must be some kind of a response, so a reinforcer, or it could be a punishment, we'll talk about that, for the behavior, and that reinforcer has to kind of follow immediately the behavior and be associated with that behavior. So for example, if you see a student help out another student, let's say, right, sharing their crayons, you can't wait an hour and then go back and say, oh, good job, right? Because the student isn't going to know what you're referring to. So it has to be an immediate and specific response. Like, wow, thank you so much for sharing your crayons with your friend. Good job, right? But immediately, so that the student is learning, and remember the behaviors say learning is a behavioral change. The student is learning, oh, when I do this behavior, I'm going to get rewarded. All right, so let's talk about what kind of responses we can give to our students. We basically break them down into two types of responses: reinforcers and punishers. Reinforcers are things that we can do as teachers that will increase the likelihood of the behavior being repeated. So, for example, we have positive reinforcers and we have negative reinforcers. Positive reinforcers are a rewarding consequence. For example, if all of students come in, we have a routine in our classroom that they put their homework in the middle of the table and they get out their writing journals as soon as they come in. If everybody in the class or everybody at the team is doing that, the teacher can reward table points. So students are doing this behavior to receive table points. Another positive reinforcer is praise. Our students crave genuine praise. It could be something like an extra recess. It could be some free time. It could be having music on in the classroom. Whatever it is that students find rewarding. And that's going to differ depending on each group. A negative reinforcer means that you remove a negative consequence. And so people think, oh, negative reinforcer is bad. No, remember, this is also going to increase the likelihood of the behavior being repeated, right? So, for example, a negative reinforcer could be that students know that I'm going to take away table points if there's too much talking or if there's incomplete work. So then the students are going to finish their work or pay attention to avoid having the points taken away. Now, punishers, on the other hand, decrease the likelihood of the behavior being repeated. So I want the behavior to stop. So a punishment is applying an unpleasant stimulus. So sent to the principal, right? Something like that. Or sending a note home, or having the student have to stay after school or stay inside. Removing a rewarding stimulus, something that students like to do that's taken away. So it could be loss of recess time. Not a good way to do that, especially for our overly active students who need to get that energy out. So it could be, though, for example, maybe we were going to have a movie on Friday afternoon, but because of undesired behavior, we're not going to do that. So students are losing something that they want. That would be a punisher. Obviously, physical abuse would also fit into a punisher, but that's something that we want to avoid, right? So what Skinner is saying is that when our students behave in certain ways, and remember that behavior is reflecting their learning, we want to reinforce it if it's the behavior that we're wanting to see, or we want to provide punishers if it's the behavior that we're not wanting to see.